Hello, my name is Lente, please you call me Lente, and welcome to Architectural Essentials Series 2 Episode 1. The title of this video is The Eye Opener. This is because in this first episode I want to show a method you can apply to look at projects or builds. And it will help you to be able to separate the good from the great from the extraordinary well executed builds. I'm going to first show a render for about 5 seconds, and I want you to look at it and try to remember what you looked at and in what order, what parts of the render. You are allowed to look at it as long as you want, but I think sort of the bare minimum that you should put in is 5 seconds. And the goal of this is that you realize how you look at a project now. And after I show the technique, you can compare the technique to how you look at things now. And if you think it's an improvement, you can adopt the technique. And if you think you currently your current way of looking at things is way better, then completely ignore this video because, well, it's not relevant for you because you have a better technique. And it is obviously that it's possible. I'm not saying that this is the best be-all end-all of everything. That is something that you need to decide for yourself. So if you're ready for it, here is the short render. Okay, take another moment to memorize what you looked at and in what order, because it's really quite important. And before we get to the actual tutorial part, I first want to introduce Series 2 a bit. Now, the objective of Series 2 is to be a be-all, end-all Architectural Essentials series. I had Series 1, and when I created Series 1, I had this idea that everybody had a really short attention span and I needed to put as much information as possible in as shortest time span as possible. So I rushed through these videos really quickly, and I didn't cover everything which I think could have been relevant. I cheaped out on a lot of variations to particular techniques which I would show which I would want to show now, because I've had a lot of feedback on this series. A lot of people absolutely love this series. A lot of builders which I respect myself were like, wow man, you need to do these videos again, because they were awesome and they helped me a lot to think critically about how I do things, how I would do things differently. So there was some really awesome feedback, and that actually motivates me to want to do it again, but then better. And I will also show new things. I will put things in relation to each other, because on a case-to-case basis, you will need to decide which technique you will follow and which ones not, which one to favor, which not. In the end, it's all your opinion. You need to grow as a builder. Or, well, I'm not saying that I can learn you anything, but hopefully I can. And at the very least, you will have another view at things, and you can, think about how people do things differently. So, in this first video, I want to cover a technique, how to look at things, because looking at things is fundamental. It is absolutely fundamental. You need to see what goes on in a build for you to improve it. If it's your own build, you need to recognize the problem areas so that you can improve those problem areas so that the overall build improves. But if you're looking at someone else's build, you still will need to be able to recognize the problem areas. That is because when you recognize the problem areas, you will also recognize what the builder does well. The things that they do well, you can learn from. The things that you think you could improve on, you learn from as well, because that means that you do things differently, which you think is better as how they do it. And this could be a strength of you personally. You might have a far better understanding of sort of, like, I don't know, the physics of airships. And that might be a strength of yours. That might be actually the thing which you really need to hammer at, and that you could totally own on making airships, building airships, and totally like be known as the guy who makes awesome airships, because you know how to make this awesome airship. You know it better than anyone. And if you see this, then you can hammer at it, own it. So if you need to look critically at things for you to like sort of be all that you can be. And I think the natural way that people will look at things, they will group things together and make an overall decision. Oh, this part is good, this part is good, okay, the overall build is good. But we need to look past these things. We need to look at the details of builds, because the difference between builds is generally made in the details. The ideas that people follow, like I'm going to make a steampunk town. Like everybody makes steampunk towns. How are you going to do it differently? How are you going to do it better? That is the question that you need to ask yourself. And only if you look at what other people do and see potential, see areas that you can improve upon, you can make a better steampunk town than anybody. So looking at things is so important, and we need to look at the details, because the thing that people cheap out on are the details. They think, okay, people will not look at this garden, so I am not going to put any effort in it. That is absolutely wrong. People will look at it. I will look at it. I will see that it is shitty. I will make a better garden, make a better overall project. That is how you surpass sort of the competition. Like everybody in the build community is friends with each other. We all like each other generally, but in the end, well, we're all competing for the same appreciation and affection from the community as other builders. So in a way, we are competition. And yeah, so the first realization that you need to make is that you need to look at the details. You need to, look past the eye-catchy thing. Every build has its eye-candy, the thing which instantly draws you in, which you think, oh cool, this is an awesome cathedral in a cool little town. Well, that's a cool cathedral, but you don't need to focus at it, because if you were only to focus at the cathedral, which you can make as well, you would fail to recognize how all these smaller buildings are actually pretty shitty. You can make an awesome cathedral like that and make better small buildings and make a better overall project. But if you fail to look at these smaller buildings and fail to realize you could do better, you will fail to be able to see that you can in fact do better. So we are going to look at the details. And that is why it is important to look very critically at builds. Not only your own, because as said, if you fail to recognize that, let's say that you made the cathedral with the small village. If you fail to recognize that your small houses are actually shitty, then somebody else who will look critically at your build will think, ha, I can do better. And he will make something better. And yeah, he will take the credit. Potentially. I don't know. Okay, so my objective is to show you how to separate the good from the great from the extraordinary. And we need to look beyond the obvious. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a heat map. I'm going to superimpose a heat map on sort of the render and other projects which I showed in the beginning of the video. I only showed the render, of course. The other projects you'll see afterwards. Okay. I'm going to make this heat map, but in fact you can do it far quicker, far better in game when you're actually walking or flying through a build. This video is 2D, and like the grid would be totally shifting all the time, and there would be no way for me to visualize it differently. But when you do this in game, it will be far better and easier. And yeah. Okay, so let's get to it. What I'm doing is I will take this render and I'll put a grid on it, and I am going to color the squares in the grid in either red or green. Green marks an area which I think, okay, there's something cool going on in this area. Red marks areas which I think, nothing going on here. That's bleh. And what I'm going to do after having done that for a very rough grid is I'm going to put a finer grid on top of it, and I'm going to follow the same process, and I'm going to put on another layer and another layer. And by this you see the areas which are getting really red. These are problem areas. The areas which are more green have something cool in them, so I can ignore them for now, because they are actually carrying the rest of the build, because the rest of the build is shitty, but the green areas are cool. They are good. They are the best what this build has to offer. Now, if I want to improve this project, I, of course, I'm going to look at the red areas. Simple, isn't it? Like, it's really easy. Now, how do you decide how small to make this grid? And the way that you should do this is you should take the smallest part that you can divide the whole build by and make the grid the size of the smallest part. Now, to put it in terms that are easier to understand, let's say that you have a village. A village is made up out of buildings, a lot of buildings, and one building might be good, one building might be great, and another one shitty. So if you look at every individual building making up the whole as the whole of the village, let's say that you have 2 good buildings, 1 shitty building, and 1 great building. The average quality of the village is good. If you improve the shitty building and do some tweaks to the good buildings, you can maybe increase the level of the overall village to a great, just by focusing primarily on the shitty building, because that is totally dragging down the whole of the project, the whole of the village, because the shitty is just shitty. And of course there's a balance that you need to find. Let's say that you have an individual building that you want to apply this to. You can have an individual window seal which you think, okay, now this window seal is shitty. Then you need to do something to that, because you could look at the first story of a building and compare it to the second story and see, okay, I like the second story more. What can I do to make the first story better as the second story? And so look at your build, because a build is never, I guess, perfect. And yeah, that's how you go about it. So now let's get back to how you looked at the first time I showed the render in the beginning of the video. And now that you see the heat map in front of you, you might think, okay, I might have missed a few things because there were really small details in this and I couldn't very clearly see them in this small YouTube video, and that's perfectly fine. That's very understandable actually. But you might also realize that you looked at the build as a whole but failed to see a lot of the details, and that is the realization that I wanted you to make. Because if you do not cut these builds up in smaller parts and actually look at every small part, you will overlook things very quickly. And that is the thing that I want to show. That's the thing that I really want to learn you. Now, I have some other examples. I have another render from a build made by KinoFox, which is a very skilled builder. And he allowed me to use one of his projects in this video. Now, the size of these areas are still the same, but what's in these areas is very different, because this is just a castle. So in some grid areas you only see a part of the roof and a small part of the facade, and we think, I can do nothing with this because it's doing nothing for me. It's just a piece of roof. And that is the way you should look at things, because, well, maybe you want to make a chapel in the roof. I don't know. Maybe you want a window in it. That might be good, might be great, might be shitty. Maybe it's a ruined thing, and maybe there's a hole in the roof. Maybe not. These are all decisions which you can make after realizing, okay, this roof part, nothing is going on, nothing's interesting going on with it. Maybe I should do something with it. Maybe that will increase the overall quality of the build. And so that is how you could use this technique. And of course I have also an example of a really well executed build, and that is a build made by Carlo, I don't know how to pronounce his nickname. And I think probably everybody has seen it, and like I've seen more work made by Carlo, and I think a lot of people have. And the attention to detail he puts in and the scale of his projects, like this is extraordinary. This is the sort of goals everybody should strive to achieve. And if we look at these heat maps, we see that everything is nicely tucked on the actual build itself. and that is because, well, yeah, it's just everything is there. Every grid of the build looks good, looks great. Yeah, what's there to say about it? It's a really good build, and I would expect nothing less from Carlo, to be honest. He's a really awesome builder. Now, if we compare these grids, a picture becomes clear. My build, which I showed in the beginning, might have had 2, maybe at tops 3 areas which were interesting in the render. KinoFox building had actually, it was quite nicely grouped, which my opinions at least for the build, was quite nicely grouped, and yeah, so it was a really good build. But if we look at Carlo's build, it was just his whole build is actually green. It's good, it's really awesome. So my build, I think, could be improved on easily, very easily. KinoFox build is good. Yeah, it's great. He has a really awesome facade. You should check out the cast actually, because he does some really interesting sort of Renaissance Baroque style stuff. That's really cool. You should check it out as PMC as well, and for Carlo as well, because, well, but I assume you already know him. And if you don't know Carlo yet, then you should, shame on you, you should know him. Come on. There will be links in the description, by the way, to the projects. So yeah, by now I hope that you have learned a thing about how to look at things, how you can apply this grid, and you can practice this as well. If you're going to PMC anyway, just to check out KinoFox or Carlo's work, there is another technique that you can follow and easily do. It is it's not as well, you don't need to open up Paint and do this thing with colored squares yourself. What you can do is just make a frame with your hands, and I will just show an image on the video how you could do it. Basically, we're going to do, I guess, what a cinematographer, if I pronounce it right, does to find the frame that he wants of something that he wants to show. And we are going to make, of course, the frame a lot smaller as the total of the screenshot would be, and we'll slide that over the screenshot to look at every part, every smaller part of the build, and that will enable us to realize which parts are shitty and which ones are good, and that way you don't actually even have to download projects. You can, yeah, it's a really simple and basic way to sort of train your technique, and I think it will help you a lot, will suit you well. That's it for this video. I hope that I made you think about how to look at projects. I hope that I learned you something, I showed you something, and I also hope that we'll see you again next episode, and have an awesome day.